We have to start out with land use ordinance amendments, and I believe we're going to start with our city planner, Jenny Franceschi, to review some items. Is that a good assumption?
That is a great assumption.
Awesome. Way to start.
So we'll start off with some of the easier ones and work our way through. We had previously gone through a map amendment process where the business professional office district was removed from the map, and we replaced that with various zoning districts that were more in keeping with the lands that were business professional office district. And that was the area that was on outer Stroudwater Street. So it was lands that were of Maine Turnpike Authority, and then there is that last stretch of office buildings and contractor buildings right before you hit the Portland line that fell more in keeping with highway services. So we changed those to highway services, and then there was one lot that had been sort of left as an island, and it was in the middle of an R2 district. So we changed that to an R2 zoning. The property owner was happy that they were going to now be a residential lot. So we went forward and we created the map to reflect that. Now that we did the map amendment, all of the language within the ordinance that references business professional office district just needs to be stricken. So that is the first item that has been provided to you as an ordinance amendment.
Do we have comments? Councilor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes as presented by Ms. Franceschi.
For the business professional office district?
Yes.
Okay. And Councilor Peoples seconded that. Is there any further discussion? Any questions? Councilor Riley?
Sure. So on this one, this is purely a ministerial one. Then there's no change or impact to any property in Westbrook by making this change.
Nope. All of the parcels that were previously business professional office district have now been rezoned. So there are no more lots in the city with business professional office district.
Very quickly, I don't want to start out talking at the first item here, prolong things, but from a historical perspective, I think Brendan and Ann might remember it. In early 2002, 2003, if you remember when Matt Eddy was here as our planner and development director, the city undertook, following the 2000 comprehensive plan process, a very wide sweeping rezoning of the city. It literally was a repeal and replace. It wasn't amending the ordinance, it literally was replacing the ordinance. And there were a lot of relatively new forward-thinking concepts that were incorporated into that, some of which were received fine and some of which weren't. In particular, the area of Outer Stroudwater Street on both sides of Stroudwater were envisioned as being higher-end office campus types of uses, which on paper looked very, very nice. However, many of the owners of that property wanted nothing to do with that. They were farmers, or they were in other types of places, and so
Soon-to-be city councilors.
soon-to-be city councilors, soon-to-be chair of the Appropriations Committee of the state the House of Representatives. But in response to the zone changes, there was a lot of pushback, and in particular along Outer Highland Avenue, a lot of the larger landowners got their land moved back into what the previous zoning had been. And what was conceived as a large professional office area for future development, lush, green, campus-like atmosphere, probably 90% of it was eliminated by rezoning it back. What it left was a relatively small collection of properties, primarily on, as you head towards Portland, on the left side of Stroudwater, where there was let's call it an eclectic mix of commercial uses. From all the way from the historic perspective of the Z-Bart shop, which I haven't seen in years. A few other types of, I think there's an auto sales lot, but a whole mix of different commercial uses. And they didn't fit into the professional office park, but they also weren't residential or weren't farming. So that area was just left and became the remaining business professional office district with really no likelihood that it was going to ever move to that type of zoning. A lot of it was already developed in a variety of uses. So that has persisted for a number of years, and we began encountering folks as some of the property started to turn over, or at least in the cases where it was a landlord and tenant situation, the tenants, commercial tenants started turning over, and were quite shocked to come in and see that they were moving into a business professional office district, which didn't look like a business professional office district at all, and their business didn't fit into that zoning standard, fit into what was there in the surrounding area. So we were approached by a couple of business people who were saying, this really doesn't make sense. Number one, now it looks like a little island. And so the planning board went through the process, and it wasn't a situation where everything went to one different zone. Depending on the current uses on the property, depending on the uses on the abutting properties, I think Jenny said there were 3 different zoning ordinances that resulted from this process. But it really was to match the needs and the situation of each one of the property owners as best we could with the repertoire of zoning ordinances we had. So this is sort of finishing off a process that began in early 2000, and we're just really cleaning it up at this point.
Any further comments? So is the motion to send it to city council for approval? Okay, so that's the motion that's been made. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's unanimous in favor. And the next is the Section 403 Village Review Overlay Zone. Let Jenny talk about that.
So there are 2 components to the Village Review Overlay Committee that we'd like to discuss with you tonight. I'll start with, let me just see how they fell within your document, just so that I keep you in order. The first one that's in order of your document is the establishment of the Village Review Committee. Currently, we have a Village Review Committee. It's made up of 3 residents, but there was never a codification of the actual committee within the ordinance. So this language is being inserted to create the language so that this committee has standards like every other committee has. So we had based a lot of the language off of how ZBA is written. I provided it to the Village Review Committee for their review, and what we have in here is that the committee members are appointees from the mayor to the city council. We have 3 members minimum, but no more than 5. And that we are trying to show that the folks that are being selected for this committee do have some level of expertise in either historic preservation, architecture, or a field of like interest, so that we are trying to find people that do a really good job in trying to help enhance our downtown.
And this was actually not listed on the agenda, but it was in the packet. So it's section, is it 278?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So section 278 is what we're looking at amending, which the summary and everything is in your packet.
And this would be a complete addition to the ordinance that doesn't currently exist.
Councilor Riley?
Sure. Could we probably just take that along with then the next section as well?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, because I actually have a question about the next section.
So the next section is within the land use ordinance. It deals with the establishment of the role of the Village Review Committee within the process of the Village Review Overlay standards. What we had been having sort of as an issue was in demolition permits. Somebody came in the Village Review Overlay District, and they wanted to remove a shed. They wanted to remove a garage. The way it's currently written, it's any demo needs to go to the planning board, which for those types of structures seems to be a bit of a regulatory hoop that they don't necessarily have to go through. So on smaller scale type items such as that, what we suggested is that we go through the village review committee. So that they have that level of review. If they feel strongly about an item, they can kick it to planning board. So we wanted to establish their role within the demolition permit. And then we also wanted to establish their role within the review process. And the only other components that I wanted to highlight within the 403 document is looking at signage. Right now, the ordinance requires that for every sign permit within the downtown, you have to go through a notification process, which requires everybody who abuts you, as well as a 10-day waiting period. No other sign permits in the city have to go through that level of review. And we felt that that was really more of a staff level item where we were really delaying the process for these downtown businesses. And we wanted to try to be as business friendly to these folks and encourage the vitality within our downtown. So although they are a component that we review internally, they would be exempt from the fee as well as the notification requirements.
Councilor Riley, do you have more questions?
Thanks, I did have a question, just kind of how, with these two play together, I see where, if the VROS committee feels it needs to have a planning board review, it'll kick it up to the planning board. But what if the staff or the planning board think the planning board should be reviewing it?
At this juncture, the way we have written it, every demolition permit goes to the VROS committee. So it's not even a staff determination for a demo. So that it definitely has to go to VROS, and then if they don't find the concern, then it would go to planning board. So the hope would be is that if it was a structure of any sort of quality, that the VROS committee would say absolutely not, or staff might just completely bypass VROS and go straight to planning board. But it wouldn't be a staff level review on a demo permit.
Right, no, not staff level review, but in terms of, so I didn't, it may be in here and I might have missed it, but, so if staff or the planning board thinks that something's serious enough that it warrants planning board review, how does that happen? I see how VROS can elevate it up to planning board, but how does planning board or staff say, no, it needs to get up to planning board?
You mean as far as criteria, or if it's at the planning board level, then it would be there.
Well, I mean, just to use the example of the
Yep.
demolition, so like, for example, say there's some structure that the VROS committee looks at and says, yeah, we don't care. But planning board says, hold up, we want to review that. How does that happen?
The planning board wouldn't be aware of that because it wouldn't have gotten to their level. The VROS committee would have been the committee to have reviewed it. The hope would be that you would have staff that would have at least the knowledge of what is and is not historic in the downtown area to be able to push those types of issues up to planning board immediately. So the intent of this VROS committee is more so on much smaller scale type items such as a shed, a garage, those types of things that really have no historical quality, but anything of any sort of substance should be going right up to planning board. So for instance, right now we have the SAPI demo with the fish lift passage project is going through. As part of that, they are reviewing the demo of the powerhouse building, which currently is in a really structurally, it is structurally deficient. So they're going to have to, as part of their review process, state that they take no issue with that structure being removed down. But that will,
VROS will
the
have to say
planning
that.
board will say that.
Planning board will say that. So how does this process flow? Does it come first to you, and then you say this goes to VROS?
Yes.
And so at your level, when initially comes in, you could decide which way to divert it.
Yes,
And so if you thought it was serious enough, you'd send it to planning board.
correct.
And then this whole thing wouldn't even be
It wouldn't even apply.
implemented.
Nope.
Would it be helpful to have at least some kind of a report given contemporaneously with this to the like the planning board, that we've sent these to VROS in case, so the planning board does know what's going on?
So a summary report on any of these types of items should be sent to the planning board for their,
Yeah, so that they know in case someone on the planning board would have an objection to, because you said they wouldn't know until probably after the fact it happened.
for the intent of how this is worded, it would be after that permit would have been issued. So from how this is worded right now, notice wouldn't be given to the planning board until probably after the demo permit had been reviewed by REROS, and if it was considered non-historical, they would be allowed to move forward. So if we waited until a planning board meeting, then really the way that this is worded wouldn't save the applicants any time, which is sort of where we were trying to assist people that had minor sheds or garages, is not have to wait for the next planning board meeting to hit that mark. So that was the only intent of the language.
So are you, because I know planning board's a little different procedurally in how people interact with it than city council.
Mhm.
So I don't know if this is, so are you allowed to, would you be allowed to just simply send a communication to the planning board members that this is, here are the three things that have been referred to VROS, and then a planning board member could say, hold up, Jenny, I'd like to take a look at that. Is that kind of communication permitted?
That's not typically how the planning board interacts. It's normally we set an agenda and then
Right.
we bring the items to a meeting versus we can't really have that level of dialogue with planning board members. Otherwise, it's considered out of meeting communication. We could notify the board members that this is going on. I'd be hesitant to get into any sort of dialogue with them about an item. I guess if one objected, that we could just pull the permit at that point and just say that they can't move forward. If one member replied back and said no, or we can't. It would be almost taking a vote over email, which we can't do.
The Village Review Committee meetings, are they noticed public meetings, public can attend, public can speak if they want? Or, I've never been to a
The
Village Review meeting, so I don't know.
These typically are very informal meetings with an applicant. We typically have them at 7:30 in the morning, and it's more so, the way that they're built is more so to sit down with an applicant, review their architecturals, and see if they comply with the standards. They don't have any sort of, currently, they don't have a binding vote. This would be a recommendation back to staff. So even the vote of the VROS is a recommendation back to staff for an administrative approval. But it's more than just one person looking at it, which is where staff was at. We didn't necessarily think that we should be outright approving every demo permit, even on a small scale. We thought we at least should have somebody reviewing what we consider to be de minimis. So they're not technically making a vote, but they recommend back to staff and say, yep, we think that this garage clearly doesn't have any sort of historical value. We concur with staff. You guys can go forward and issue the demo permit. If they didn't agree, then it would go to the planning board, and ultimately the planning board would then issue the certificate that allows a demo to move forward.
So I don't want to take up a lot of time. I definitely, I don't have an issue or an objection to this. I'm willing to support it. I would like us to think before we vote on it, city council, if there's a way that we can provide some communication to the planning board in case it's an objection. Because by the time they'll find out about it, whatever it is was torn down.
Yep, I can look at this language and see if there's anything that we can do to tweak it. The only, we'll just have to talk to see, if we make a substantive change, if it has to go back to the planning board, because this is in the land use ordinance, but we can look at that.
I have a comment to piggyback on that. So is there an appeals procedure? If the village review overlay, they say no, can they appeal to the planning board?
So what would ultimately come out of this would be that the village review would provide a recommendation that ultimately they have to provide a unanimous recommendation to move the permit forward. If they don't, it's a direct line, then they can go to the planning board, and the planning board can then hear them out. So then it's not that it would just die at the village review level, then they can go to the planning board.
Okay, so if they vote that they can't have a demolition permit, then it automatically goes to planning board?
Yep, and then
Got
they
it.
could make their case to the planning board.
Okay. Anybody else? Counselor Chow?
Yes, thank you. Through you to our city planner, Ms. Franceschi. So let's say that I'm a bad neighbor, and the village review approves this, whatever it is, unanimously. Can I appeal it to the planning board, or how do I don't like the decision of the village review, and it's unanimous, and once it's unanimous, they get their plan. Is there any sort of I feel threatened, or how do I appeal the unanimous village approval process?
Ultimately, the demo permit would be issued by the code enforcement officer, and then that would be appealable to the ZBA.
That could go to the ZBA.
Okay.
Because, remember, the village review district, group does not issue anything. They make a recommendation back to staff. A demo permit will be issued by the code enforcement officer. Any action by the code enforcement officer is appealable to the ZBA. So there is a path, once that happens, that would provide the appeals option.
Counselor Peoples?
Just to kind of give this a little historic perspective, we have the Village Review Committee because when we first started working on downtown revitalization many years ago, it was felt that it might not be a bad idea to have people from the community who were connected to the downtown and to its more historic structures to prevent something happening like happened with the skates block. That's why it exists. It doesn't exist in order to make laws or, basically tell people what they can and they can't do. It's there basically as an advisory body to the planning board, because they're supposed to be people. That's why when we talked about what these people are supposed to, the skill sets they're supposed to have. They're supposed to have the skill sets that will allow them to understand what things of historic significance are. So this is basically something that we have had this for the last 30 years, literally 30 years. Now we're finally codifying it because we finally now have design standards for the downtown, which the Discover Downtown Westbrook basically worked on creating. We're starting to review our sign ordinances. This is all part of that whole, how are we going to make the downtown the best we can? So it's not this, I think people are overthinking this to some extent.
Okay. Any other comments? Counselor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there an actual committee of members for this? Because it's been my understanding under the previous city planner that it was pretty much her and maybe code enforcement officer or something like that.
There are real members.
Okay.
It's not fake. We have 3 members. We have 2 architects and one very active community member who also has a incredible flair for landscaping. So these 3 ladies sit down and meet with all of our applicants, and they go through whatever the architecturals are that are being proposed for these structures, and they provide wonderful feedback and ways in which to work with the applicant on how to enhance and make our downtown better. So this committee does that work.
Okay, so are the people who are on the committee publicized, and how did they get on the committee? Because in my time that I've been involved here, I've never seen an appointment come through.
Just recently, we did have an appointment of Jill Johannings. I always mess up her last name. And then we have Margaret Ennis and Eileen Schutz.
Okay. And they were appointed by the council a while ago?
Eileen and Margaret have been on for quite some time.
Yeah. The procedure is appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the council.
Okay. And have those all been confirmed by the council recently?
Well, not recently.
Not recently.
And there's not terms, I don't believe.
There hasn't been. That's why this language.
Is there going to be?
This language is going to
Creating terms.
create
Remember,
terms.
this was done with no ordinance language outlining how it's supposed to be
30
done. So I think, I can't guarantee you it's always happened. That was the procedure that was supposed to be followed, but literally without codification in the ordinance, you really never set of rules to go by. But I know recently, the most recent one I know did come through that process. That I do know.
Yes.
I don't even know when Eileen or Margaret were placed on the committee. We know.
And it would probably be good to bring them through and establish now terms for them so that now everybody has terms and a time frame in which that they were appointed.
And so do they have like a regular schedule and minutes kept of those meetings that are posted for the public?
It is not a regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
These are when needed. Whenever an applicant comes into our office that requires village review, we contact the ladies and find out a date, and it's typically always at 7:30. That works for the three of them. We notify the applicant, and they sit down and they have their meeting. In this particular instance where we are talking about a demo permit, it is a little bit of a different element from what they currently are doing. As much as notification to the direct owners is what we could do so that process is notified that there is a public meeting when it comes to a demo permit, if that was what the council would like us to do.
And do they have minutes that are kept and that are posted on the city website for
No.
members of the public to review?
No, they don't.
If they're an official committee, isn't that something we should have? I don't know if the clerk wants to respond.
We have asked the city's attorney about, not about VRAs in general, but about committees in specifics. Not about VRAs specifically, but about committees in general, excuse me. And Natalie Burns said that for committees that are purely advisory in nature, that minutes are not required, but when actions are taken, they are. So since this is an advisory committee, minutes are not technically required.
But if they take action and approve or deny something, wouldn't,
They'd be making a recommendation, is my understanding, that they do not give final approval or denial.
So their recommendation then for my process typically is I then go to the planning board with their recommendation, and that recommendation is passed on to the planning board.
but in instances like demolitions or signs, they review those things. Not every application goes to the planning board, so therefore they are making a decision, or are they making an advisory decision to you?
They're making an advisory decision to me. And then
Okay.
ultimately, the code enforcement officer would issue the permits, whether they be, the VROS does not review signs. That's strictly an administrative function. Demo is the only thing that we would be introducing the VROS to do review of. And then that would be a recommendation that ultimately would go to the code enforcement officer.
Okay. I think prior to you, signs may have been technically reviewed by village review, as I know some folks that told me they got held up in that process, so.
Oh.
So that's surprising. But I guess this helps to make it more organized going forward, so I'll make a motion that we recommend the 2 village review overlay items to the city council.
Is there a second? Counselor Riley? Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous in favor. Next item is section 404 of the land use ordinance amendments for the sign ordinance.
So in this particular ordinance package, we wanted to clarify some of the issues that we've been seeing within the ordinance, specifically within the city center district. There are statements within the ordinance that are very prohibitive as it pertains to type of signage. And we allow for certain types of signs to be reduced down when you're in, say, a residential district. If you're doing a new sign, that Holly's Gas is a great example. They want to put up a new sign. They are allowed to reduce it down 25%, but they don't have to completely comply with the ordinance all the way down to the standards of the zoning district. It's sort of a gradual stepping down of the signage, which still affords these folks the ability to have a level of signs, but trying to make them more conforming. That's already in our residential zoning district, is the statement that allows for that 25% reduction. We felt that that type of language would work as well in the city center district to afford. What it does is it affords those folks the ability to reutilize a sign, and it doesn't make them feel like that, well, nope, I've got my square footage, so I won't improve my sign. So if you don't allow people to improve their signs, then you will continue to have signage out there that is old and not updated. But if you allow people to have some level of square footage, then maybe they will go out there and do some level of improvements. They know that they may get a slight reduction, but they will improve their sign. So it is an incentive, and we wanted to try to provide that for our downtown businesses. We wanted to clarify the window signage process. Right now, we regulate it, but with no permit. And with no permit, there's absolutely nothing that the code enforcement office can do about it. So what we have added in here is that window signage does need to go through a sign permit process. There was some inconsistent languages as it related to community event signs, so those languages have been made consistent. And certain types of signage, we have clarified. Open flags, we are clarifying what an open flag is so that folks can have it and be legally conforming, because currently if you have an open flag out right now, technically it's a non-conforming sign. So we wanted to provide that as the ability for somebody to have a sign, but also wanted to have it within certain parameters of a traditional open sign.
Had a question on that.
Sure.
Piece right there.
Council-
Thank you.
oh,
Through you,
President Reardon, sorry.
Jenny. So, looking at number 4 in 404311 under general.
Mhm.
So at this point in time, I guess those feather flags, those are not permissible?
They're not permissible by the nature of how this is worded. However, we just wanted to be crystal clear by putting that word in the actual language. So any flag that provides any sort of movement or distraction to the public, especially in our downtown area, is not permitted. And because you're in the downtown and we're talking about a high pedestrian area, we want people that are in their cars to be focused on the road and not necessarily be distracted by signage that's moving off to the side and potentially end up in a situation where they don't see a pedestrian. So it is stated in there, but we just, for purposes of clarity, we've just put the term in there that now has evolved.
So once this is amended, if we do have some, do we obviously need to go back and talk to business owners that have them now, or have they been eliminated, or?
As we are seeing them go up, we are telling property owners to take them down. And if you see any out there, please let us know.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Riley?
Just, what is a feather flag?
Thank you.
It's,
Sign.
yeah, it's a vertical sign
Those
and it
things that
waves
move.
in the wind.
Okay.
Not to be confused with the
Incredibly
crazy
annoying.
men that are blow-ups that do the.
Crazy men allowed?
No crazy men allowed. They're
Okay.
distractive.
Councilor Foley, did you have?
Yes, couple of questions. In the past, I know we made some changes to this years ago under the previous city planner, some of the major changes were to the materials of signs. Is there any, and back then it was a concern of a lot of folks that it was becoming more costly, materials and stuff were becoming more costly for the signs that we were requiring. Have you noticed that to be a concern with folks under your leadership, and are you proposing any changes? I didn't see any in particular, but.
Nope, we're not changing any of the materials. The materials are still wood, metal, or a composite board that is similar to metal. So we've been working with businesses as they've been coming in, and we haven't had any issues.
So like businesses that have like those illuminated signs from the inside that are like plastic, those are like non-conforming.
Those are non-conforming. One thing that we are trying to clarify in here, and it has been past practice, that if somebody just wants to change the panel out of those internally illuminated signs and they're not affecting the frame, then we've been allowing people to do that. The language in the ordinance is not quite consistent with how the policy has been implemented. We are now making the ordinance be consistent with the policy, where we still are allowing people to do a change out of the panels. If they take the board down, then they have to bring it into compliance.
So is that what like Dunkin' Donuts did?
That's
in
what
order to
Dunkin' Donuts did. Yep, they just changed out the panel.
Understood. And then I did notice when I was looking at the materials that it was referred, the business professional office district was referred in the ordinance, and considering we just eliminated that, we may want to.
That is in the elimination language that you just approved.
Oh, it will eliminate it from this ordinance? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So, I've been working, well, actually, I wanted to step back for one moment. I just want to just thank also the people within my department, Rebecca Spatella, Linda Gain, David Finichetti. All of the body of work that's before you tonight involves all of them, and they've been, I wouldn't be here with all of this without all of them. So we have been working on this for quite some time, so some of these items all come together and they're all going to piecemeal, so the BPOD stuff will be eliminated.
Understood. Thank you. Or I guess I'll make a motion to. Unless Council Reed.
Just
Council
have
Redden, sure.
One, yeah. So, just reading through here, if there's any type of motion with letters or anything like that, the Westbrook Regional Vocational Center has a billboard type thing that changes. Is this going to, any language in here going to affect that sign?
Nope, that is outside of the purview of this district. So this district is specific to the city center district, that is in another
Okay.
district.
All right, thank you, sorry.
Go ahead. I have a question after you.
Sure.
I'll let you go first.
All right, cool. Thank you. The window signs. Currently, window signs are only permitted on the first or ground floor. What if my office is on the second floor?
You could have a beautiful blade sign, or you could have window-mounted sign, building-mounted signage. There is ways in which to have signage on the building that would be for folks on upper stories.
Okay. But I'm not allowed to have a window sign, even though that my competitor downstairs on the first floor has one?
It's typically meant more for a storefront size sign, windows rather, where you have so much window space.
Like a picture window or something?
Yeah, that was the intent of the language.
Okay. So would I, if I had a little vinyl replacement window, can I put a sign up there or not, or?
It'd be limited to 25% of that window, which would be a kind of small sign.
Yes, it'd be a very small sign. Okay, so the window signs is meant for the first floor stores with big windows.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm just curious, when you review things like this that affect, especially our downtown district, if our economic director is pulled in any of these conversations, or a Discover Downtown Westbrook group, are they consulted at all in all of this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this was reviewed by DDW. Abigail Chaffee brought this language to them. They are supportive of the language, as it does support the downtown businesses. And Dan's supportive of all of this, so, so yes.
Great, thank you. Any other further comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, so a motion has been made and seconded to send this to council for approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous in favor. Next item is land use ordinance amendments on artesian food. Is that how you say that?
Artisan.
Artisan. Oh, artesian is like a well, right?
It's artesian.
Artisan food and beverages. Okay. You're up again, Jenny.
Okay, so we're gonna see a series of uses that we're going to be proposing in various zones. To just sort of step back, anytime that you add a use into a zone, you are required to notify every property owner within that zone as well as 500 feet around the zone. So we do this sparingly because of the amount of notification that is required to go through these processes. So there are several uses that we are proposing, and the reason that we are proposing it is we are bundling the uses, because if we're going to go through this process, we don't want to expend funds multiple times. So this particular use, the artisan food and beverage, is sort of born out of tasting rooms, where we were first trying to look at what is an appropriate use term for tasting rooms. Currently, they are an accessory use to a manufacturing operation. So under those terms, it doesn't really provide us with the standards that a tasting room should really be following. It just follows manufacturing. So it has been proposed that we actually determine these as their own uses and zone them in the districts that we think are appropriate. So artisan food and beverage, we are proposing to include in the city center district, in the industrial park district, and the gateway commercial district. This definition is not specific to tasting rooms. This could also be food. So if you have a small cheese business that you want to also be able to sell your cheese product and some of the ancillary products that would go along with cheese, such as crackers or drinks, not alcoholic but other.
Mousetraps?
Um,
Blue cheese?
I don't want mousetraps in my establishment. So that would be the premise of what this definition is going to encompass. It's not going to be just specific to tasting rooms. It can be any sort of food or beverage product that somebody manufactures and could also sell on their premise. Within that, we created performance standards under the general provisions to mimic what we were finding in other municipalities and to comply with some of the state standards. We wanted to say only food product produced at the facility or products that are incidental to those produced at the facility may be sold for on-site consumption. And then there are certain parking standards that we have implemented for that, as well as life safety measures.
Councilor Reardon?
Yes, through you to Jenny. In the first sentence under definitions, small-scale production, what is that compared to?
So right now you have Mass Landing, who does small-scale production at their current location on Main Street. We were trying to look at certain gallon productions, and there wasn't necessarily a specific amount, but
So if you take like Yes Brewery in Mass Landing, obviously one smaller than the other, but then you look at another one that's larger. So I think, that's kind of vague, and I know it goes into with minimal automated processes and things like that, but it really doesn't really clearly define the size. It's up for kind of like negotiations, I guess, so.
it's not clearly stated. Again, if you did have, not necessarily the brewer example, but if you were the cheesemaker, that it's not a hard and fast what we're going to necessarily consider to be small or large. That could be something that once we utilize this and come up with some sort of some better measurements as this evolves. Right now, we're trying to at least provide standards where we don't have them. We could at some point better define what small scale means in order to say whether it's gallons, whether it's for cheese, it would be something completely different. And it does fall a little bit into the discretion of whoever's sitting in my seat.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? I have a couple questions. So, and it says in the definition, it says may include direct sales to consumer and product tasting. So if they're just producing the food or beverage there and they're not actually selling it to the public, does that fall under this as well? So I'm thinking like a caterer that is using a commercial kitchen and they're bringing the food elsewhere. Does that fall under this?
It's possible that could. When somebody comes in to us for a catering business, they typically come with a letter of intent. And if they were felt to fall within that definition, they could be called that, or they could be called the definition, and I'd have to have the list of definitions that we have in the ordinance as to where the caterer would fall best. Sometimes we've used a definition too broadly, and that's what my concern has been with the use of the manufacturing term in allowing potentially a lot of things to fall underneath manufacturing that otherwise should be clearly defined and should only be in the certain zones in which that we're looking for them.
So
It's typical.
Yeah.
Yeah, the term production is typically meant for something that you're going to be packaging versus somebody that would actually be just making food and then bringing it to an event. But that typically falls out when we do get our letter of intent to make sure that these folks have uses that are properly defined.
And the only reason I ask is because I know there currently is someone in Westbrook that I've heard of that is making meals in a commercial kitchen and then delivering those meals individually as people order them to their homes or whatever it is. So it's not like they're going to an event and serving food. They're prepackaging and making food and then delivering each meal to people. So I don't know, that might be something that we should look at.
If you can send us an email on the location, then I can, between Ashley and also David, we can look into that.
Okay. And so like Schlotterbeck and Foss, that's considered manufacturing?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Move that we accept the change.
Okay. Second? Is there a second? Okay. Moved by Counselor Peoples, seconded by Counselor Foley. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous in favor. And the next one, again, land use ordinance amendments. This one's on veterinarian office and kennel.
Currently, right now, we have in our ordinance the term veterinary clinic and veterinary office and kennel. The term veterinary office and kennel merges two uses that should be their own distinct uses. Additionally, there is no definition for kennels in our ordinance, nor are there any standards. So what we have done with this particular ordinance is where the term veterinary clinic currently exists, where the zoning districts where veterinary clinic, right now where we are proposing it, is Gateway Commercial, Highway Services, and Industrial Park District. Veterinary clinic is currently permitted in the rural district. So we want to use the term veterinary clinic versus the term veterinary office, so that the term veterinary office is going to be adjusted. So in the land use table, what you see on page 3 is where they previously had veterinary office or kennel is that we are striking through that and we are putting in the term veterinary clinic, and then under conditional uses, we are putting the term boarding kennel, so that we are defining what a boarding kennel is, and we are also providing performance standards for what kennels can and can't do.
Questions or comments? Counselor Riley?
So we're not expanding the number of districts where kennels are permitted. You're just changing the definition of them?
We're just,
Or adding a definition of them?
we're adding a definition. We're taking the term kennel and putting it in now as from an outright permitted, we're putting it as a conditional. So that means it's got to go through planning board review. We are adding kennel and clinic to the industrial park district. So that is the only technical add to the ordinance. Where we were looking at major thoroughfares through the community and where these types of operations would have the least impact, but also have the best availability to the folks that would truly need them. So if you're on major corridors going into Portland, to have a boarding kennel that you could drop your dog off of on your way to work for whatever reason, it would be on your way on a major thoroughfare versus being on one of our sub roads.
And so veterinary clinic was permitted in the rural district, is it still?
Yes,
So this doesn't change that?
this does not change it.
Okay.
Counselor Peoples?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Through you to Jenny. How have we dealt with doggy daycares? Is that what we're talking about basically here when we talk about kennel?
Yes,
Okay.
so they could either be a daycare.
Thank you, because I know that has been one of those things that's been kind of out there, and nobody really knew what that.
Yes, and so the standards would apply to a doggy daycare or potentially an overnight location that somebody would need to have their pet for a period of time.
Any other further questions? Counselor Foley?
Thank you. Just clarification. So the veterinary clinic is a definition,
Yes,
and you're just changing it from
so in the zones where,
office to clinic.
yes,
Okay, and
Yeah.
then you're defining kennel.
yes.
Understood. I'll make a motion to refer these to the council for approval.
A second, Counselor Reardon. I do have one question before we take a vote. So what about the doggy daycares that are in zones right now that, like, I know of one that's in a rural district and I know of one that's in RGA too. So what's gonna happen with those doggy daycares? Are they grandfathered?
They're grandfathered. Yeah,
Okay.
this does not, this doesn't do anything to anybody who's currently operating.
Okay.
This just clarifies for anybody that wants to newly go in.
Okay. And so a dog daycare would not be allowed in the rural district anymore?
It was not in the rural district as a use, like it wasn't a veterinary office or kennel in the rural district previously. Previously, how it's been stated in the ordinance just stated veterinary clinic.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So to Linda's point, if someone has one in the zones that she was talking about, they could have very well started it not without it being approved.
We'd have to research to find out exactly how they got there.
Okay.
As to whether or not that they were permitted prior to zoning, if they've been a historical use.
So unless there was a complaint, most likely you wouldn't be looking at any of these, and you would just consider everybody grandfathered. Unless there was a complaint,
Unless there was a complaint
you'd
that-
research and figure out if anyone knew about it, and if no one knew any about it, then it would be on us to, okay. I think that's a concern.
Yeah, is there a reason why we don't want the kennels in rural districts? I mean, if there's a large tract of land.
There isn't necessarily any issue. When we started down this road of going through and adding uses into zones, we were looking at city center district, industrial parking, gateway, commercial, to add in uses to that zone. And so some of these changes fell out as we were going down this path. If we had wanted to add in boarding kennels into the rural district, we would have had to have noticed everybody within the rural district, and that is a significant effort. So because we weren't doing a bulk add to the rural district, and that would have potentially just been a one-off, we didn't necessarily go down that road. We were focused on the other 3 districts right now.
Okay.
But that's not to say that in the future we couldn't go ahead and do that.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, so the motion's been made to refer this to council for approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? All in favor, unanimous. And next is land use ordinance amendments for Gateway Commercial District.
So on the second page of your document, you will see that we are looking at adding several uses into the gateway commercial zone. This is being done under the premise of looking at similar uses to what we currently have within the district, and trying to also create vibrancy in that gateway commercial zone to attract more commercial businesses and endeavors. We are adding one definition, a convention center, to our ordinance, and adding that in as a permitted use within the gateway commercial zone, under the premise that if you were going to have a convention center, you need to have it near the infrastructure that can support that. You've got 2 major exits to I-95 in that vicinity, so that if in the future that was ever to be an item that a developer wished to move forward on, that would be the vicinity that they would target.
Comments? Councilor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're not talking about specifics, but are these changes made in support of the Rock Row development?
These are being made in general. There is actually going to be another contract zone piece that you folks will see in the coming months that will be specifically related to them.
Okay, so Rock Row will be applying for a contract zone.
Yes.
Understood. I'll make a motion to move this change to the council for consideration.
Okay, and seconded by Councilor Reardon. Any further questions? Councilor Riley?
Sure. So, on this convention center thing, so I get that this isn't necessarily, it's not an open-air performing arts center. This is an enclosed building.
Mm-hmm.
But where we're adding that is, so what about all the impact that could be felt in the community as a result of this thing? Is that addressed elsewhere?
That would fall out of the planning board process. Anybody who would be building a convention center is doing a project that would be larger than 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Total building and impervious area.
Yeah.
They're going through the planning board process. Traffic, stormwater, all of the infrastructure would be reviewed at that time.
Is there a business or an entity that is wanting to put one of these in our gateway districts now? I'm just wondering, is there a reason that we're doing this now?
It is more preparation. Again, like I sort of mentioned, that if we're going to make some changes to uses that we've been sort of looking at, and we've been keeping a tally for years on, like, if I'm going to make a change to the ordinance, this is what I do, and my poor ordinance is all messed up. But once we have the ability to try to bring forward a grouping of items, that's when we try to bring these forward, at least in groups. So that's really sort of the premise behind this. We don't have an active proposal that has asked to put the convention center in any location.
Because it would seem that we would have more leverage from the city side if the convention center was not already a permitted use, which then would necessitate a contract zone request to come to us. So I know you don't like contract zones. I actually love them. But because we're the ones that are responsible ultimately, no matter which governing body makes the decisions in the community, we're the ones that are responsible for it. And by having that process is our best way to control it and make sure that what is, to extract certain benefits for the community or to impose certain restrictions on things. Through that process, we can much more narrowly target it rather than painting with a broad brush and having something out there. And so why not keep the convention center thing out? And if there's a request to do it, we can deal with the request and, quite frankly, impose a lot of those costs. If we got to do additional cost stuff, that we can impose those on the developer as opposed to the city handling the costs, and just deal with it then. And that way we'd have more control over the process. Then now it's a permitted use. If someone wants to do it, it doesn't come to council at all. It just goes right off the planning board. We never see it. So we don't have any ability to respond to concerns that constituents would have or anything else.
I guess the only thing that I will just say on that point would be more, the latitude of the planning board is pretty broad in what they can request and ask for. They have to be tangent, obviously, to the proposal at hand. Just for looking at just Rock Row as far as what they've currently been permitted for, their improvements are pretty broad, and their requirements are pretty substantive through what we have required of them. And the amphitheater has required almost a contract in and of itself for them to operate over there underneath what we have asked of them through our process. But I understand your concerns as it relates to maybe something slightly broader within the community. And if the council wishes to strike that, they can. We just thought that would be a good time to bring it through.
I would, I'll wait.
Okay. Council Chow?
Yes, thank you. In defense of Ms. Franceschi, so I have some clients that were looking for they want to do a wedding barn. I mean, apparently that's all the rage now. You get a house with a big barn and you hold a wedding in there, and everyone's happy. And I went to go check with the city, and we don't have any zoning for that. So my clients were like, move on, go find another town that allows it. So
They have a barn first.
So basically, if I had a client looking for a convention center and I checked the zoning, we don't allow it, I don't know if they'd say move on or check with the city if whether we'll allow it or not. So that's the only fear of not adding it in is that, oh, it's not allowed, let's move on. So that's just devil's advocate. Either way, it's fine.
Yeah, if I don't mind.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think in terms of just those two examples, certainly there are thousands of barns around, and it's a lot easier to just simply move around and move to the next community. If someone's looking to site a convention center, there are much fewer sites that could actually house a convention center. It's going to be much more of a longer a process. They're going to have, it's obviously a much more expensive process. They're going to have more people involved. They're going to be reaching out. If they want to site it in the greater Portland area, they're going to be reaching out to staff in specific targeted cities, and we're going to know, with plenty of lead time on that kind of thing. I would recommend. I don't have any issue with the changes in here, but I would recommend deleting the convention center addition into this simply because I think we can get to that if it becomes a concern, and we can much better address concerns. Not that the planning board can't address concerns, but we can be much more targeted than they can be. They can establish broader standards, and there are a variety of ways that the developer can meet those standards. If we were pursuing a contract zone for a convention center, we could be much more targeted and responsive to specific concerns raised. So I'll make a motion to amend. We
We're
already-
amending the recommendation.
Yeah, amending the recommendation to send to city council to just delete the addition of convention center, and also delete the definition of convention center.
Is there a second for that?
Just a point of order.
Okay.
Wouldn't the appropriate
Or I can make,
Wouldn't the appropriate thing to not approve this? Wouldn't the appropriate method to be to reject this proposal?
No, you can propose to modify it.
Well, because there's other changes.
But he said he didn't. Oh, okay.
No,
So
but
you're
basically,
okay. So you're supportive of the other changes.
He's talking about, yeah, exactly. He wants to adopt the ordinance, support the ordinance, but he's saying, what he's recommending is the recommendation from the city council be, to the city council be, that this receive passage with the convention center component removed.
Yep.
It just states, there, you know,
Understood.
he could wait and make the motion at the council, but at this point, he's just being upfront.
Is there a second on that motion? Counselor Chow's going to second it. I just have a question as well. Would it make sense to put it in as a conditional use? What would that cause?
It provides it's an automatic, I mean, for a convention center, it's going to planning board regardless because of the size. But conditional use it has at least a stronger a stronger regulatory feel, and it's an automatic line to the planning board. So that would, we still put the same level of conditions on it, whether it's permitted or conditional when it goes through the site plan review process. But it does highlight that as a conditional use, and as a use that we as a community feel requires a higher level of scrutiny.
But it still would never come to city council for approval.
No,
So-
not under that.
And that's really what your concern is, Counselor Riley, is that, okay. Any further questions? Yeah, Counselor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it almost would help to have the whole ordinance to see, because so these ones that we're adding, there's still a bunch of other uses that are permitted that are in addition to this list that's in here.
As far as what is currently permitted in
Yeah.
the zone, there's a whole list of uses.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things. My point is, so what in the case of like Rock Row and the music venue, was that a conditional use or?
Yes, so that was a theater. It was a conditional use.
Okay, and it didn't specify whether it was inside or outside.
No.
So in my eyes, to Victor's point, that if we're going to allow something as a conditional use, as large as that, to me, I don't think a convention center is any different. And so I'd like to at least see it be listed as a conditional to let people know that we're willing to have it, though it does potentially have a little bit more scrutiny. So I'm not supportive of completely striking it. I know if we change it as a conditional use, I don't know, does that need to go back to the planning board if we make it a conditional rather than a permitted use?
We'd ultimately have the legal guidance on that. I would think that would be a subtle difference, but I don't know the answer to that. I want to make a point of clarification here, because I think we're losing a little bit. Councilor Lowry's recommendation is to amend this committee's recommendation to the city council that they delete that item. What is going to go to the city council is what the planning board has proposed. This committee cannot amend this document. This document will appear on the council agenda,
We either
but
recommend it
if
or we
Councilor
don't.
Riley's motion passes, then the recommendation you're making is that it be deleted. This is sounding very bureaucratic, I understand, but basically, what will come to you is what came from the planning board. But if the recommendation is that it be approved without convention center, that's the recommendation this committee is making. Ultimately, the city council does whatever it wants to.
Okay, but that doesn't have to go back to the planning board?
I don't know.
Even just deleting it?
That I don't know.
But my point is so if we have a use as massive as a theater allowed, and we know that there was neighborhood concerns with that, and the council had no say on that music venue being proposed as part of Rock Row, and so the convention center to me is a massive thing as well, that potentially, if someone, to Council Chow's point, if someone comes to Westbrook and looks at our ordinances and say, oh, they don't allow a library or a museum, they don't allow a museum, I'm out of here, I'm going to the next town that allows a museum. If they look and say they don't allow a convention center, or at least they have the convention center listed as a conditional use, it would show that we are welcome to those things. Because I personally think a convention center would be a nice thing to have in our community. Obviously, it sounds like this isn't necessitated from a specific proposal, but I think in some form or fashion, I think if a conditional use fits more, and we know there's going to be more scrutiny, I don't feel as if us here at the council should have our hands on every development that comes forth in this community, and that's why we have zoning ordinances. And if our zoning ordinances already allow something as massive as a theater or outdoor music venue in this district, I can't see why we can't also allow a convention center as well. So I'm not going to support the motion to amend. I think we should continue to proceed with what the planning board's recommended. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further comments? Okay.
Voting
So
on the motion to amend.
we vote on the motion to amend, and the motion is to delete out the definition of convention center as a permitted use in the Gateway Commercial District. All those in favor? All those opposed? So 2 in favor, 4 opposed. So that will not be recommended to the council. So we're back to the original motion
To recommend it as proposed.
to recommend to the council as proposed. Is there a motion for that?
It's already been moved.
Oh, it has been moved.
Yep.
And then at the council level, my question is, if we wanted to at the council level recommend it go be a conditional use, we can make that motion at that
Absolutely.
time.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of recommending to the council as proposed? And all those against? That would be 1 opposed, and that's Counselor Riley. Okay. Next is administrative changes bundle for the land use ordinance amendments.
Oops, I lost my place. So we have a series of amendments through the land use ordinance that we are proposing, where it clarifies the terminology on what frontage is on lots, how it is measured, and the elimination of the word width. We have 3 definitions that right now are confusing when we are looking at projects. We are trying to clarify what the terminology means. When you look at page 1 of 9, you'll see the term front lot line, where that is a line which separates the lot from the public or the private way. On page 2, you'll see the term lot frontage, which currently just states the distance of the front lot line. And then a third definition, which currently exists, is lot width, which states the width of the lot measured along the front lot line between the points of intersection of the side lot lines with the front lot line on the public way. So what we have done is we have eliminated the term width and put everything into the term frontage. And the intent of frontage is the linear distance that your lot is on a public or a private street. There has been interpretations on the utilization of hammerheads as they weave in and out of a parcel, that would be considered frontage. But from what we are asking lots to provide as frontage, whether it's 50 feet in one district, 100 feet in another district, 200 feet in another district, it is meant to be the linear distance. So we are clarifying that in the definition of frontage. And further, I just wanted to show a picture of what this means for a cul-de-sac. So when we're talking about frontage on a cul-de-sac, as it is defined in this proposal, is you go to the setback line on the lot lines, and then you measure the straight line distance. So in this particular district, the frontage requirement is 100 feet. These are pre-existing lots within off of Ridge Road. So I just went and looked around at various cul-de-sacs just to see how this impacted our community. And by and large, the definition of going up to the setback line works with the frontage requirements within those zones. So the definition that we have chosen meets the intent of the linear distance. What we are avoiding is the hammerhead instance where you have this weaving nature of frontage, which really doesn't provide the intent. So hammerheads would no longer be utilized as frontage. It would be the linear distance between the two intersections of the side lot lines. The other,
Before we move on, I think we have some questions about this in particular.
How
Council
would that
Foley.
look with a hammerhead? Do you have a picture?
I could just pull up. Of course, there's no hammerheads in this vicinity.
We could look at 50 Timberland Drive.
That's a very specific request. But since you mentioned it,
You just looking for a hammerhead?
I am, and I was
Bernard Street has one.
so so talking about Timberland Drive since it was brought up. Currently, right now, you can see that the large lot is one contiguous lot. So this particular lot has frontage from the intersection of the side lot line where my cursor is all the way down to the intersection of the next lot. In any sort of future divisions that might occur on this particular parcel, it would be a straight line distance of 200 feet that would allow for the next lot to be pulled off, and that would be the frontage for the lot that would remain at the end of the street. What we are saying is that to snake in around a hammerhead does not provide what we feel is sufficient frontage. It is not a linear distance that meets the intent of what frontage is supposed to be. So in the example of the cul-de-sac, we can definitely see that it has a certain level of linear frontage that fronts on a street. And so in every zone, we have a certain minimum amount of frontage, and that is how the proposal would be implemented.
So in this instance specifically, what the constituents at that address had wrote members of the council and stated that this negatively impacts them. How does it negatively impact them?
Well, currently, they just have one lot. If in the future they decided that they wish to divide their lands, they would not be able to utilize the in and out of their hammerhead as frontage. Again, we
So you're talking about like the part that like hangs off the edge?
Yes.
That's not like whatever that is, 25 or 50
So
feet.
it's 50, 50, and 50 is the distance that is around that hammerhead.
Okay.
So that, and then you've got a 25-foot curve. So to utilize all of that curvature really isn't the intent of frontage. And a hammerhead's just meant to be there for safety purposes, but the intent of frontage should be that linear measurement.
And there isn't any other situations in the community where I think this would apply.
This
No, it would apply, but there wouldn't be a concern necessarily. So they're talking about, so what is the street frontage in that zone? Is it
it's 200 feet.
200 feet? So they're talking about using that 75, the 51, and whatever the 75 is on the other end.
Mhm.
And then continuing.
And then continuing on with additional lots to be carved off in the future.
So in your eyes, it would just be from the point that furthest corner, on the other side of the street.
Yep.
No, not that corner, the other corner.
This corner up here?
No.
End of the street.
The end of the street,
To the left.
right there.
Mm-hmm.
So in your eyes, it would be 200 feet from there to down.
In this particular instance, because of how the ordinance reads, the point of the side lot line would be this far corner, because that's where the side lot line intersects with the right-of-way. So they have a
Okay.
little bit of a funky lot because of the nature of their lot.
Understood.
And so their line would start here, and then it would go 200 feet to the point at which that we hit 200 feet along Timberland Drive.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're just concerned that that's not truly what the frontage was intended to be?
No.
Is to use like the hammerheads like that? Okay.
Yep.
I understand the concern. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions or comments? Can you just zoom out for a second? I just wanted to see the whole lot and get a better picture.
Sorry.
It's okay. So could they extend that private way of that and make a road to do multiple lots off from that?
No.
Not the
Because-
way it is now and not the way it is if we change it,
Nope.
no matter what.
No matter what. The length of the road is more than 800 feet. And we have a provision in our ordinance that you can't have a dead end off a dead end. So they're not able to build a secondary road system because of how the ordinance reads. In any particular large parcel where a constituent has necessarily a vision for their property, that's typically when they would come forward to the planning board and they would go through the appropriate subdivision process to memorialize the lots in which that they wish to create for their vision. There is the provision, if you do not wish to go through subdivision and to fall underneath the state regulations, that you can carve off lots every 5 years. So that's time. So if you have the ability for time, you can continuously carve off lots and avoid subdivision and the other regulations that go along with subdivision. But that also puts you at you're taking on a risk that the time in which that you have this vision, rules and standards change and evolve, and you are then held to the standards at which time that you want to come through for your next division. If you memorialize it and come through subdivision, then it's memorialized and they get the lots that they have gone through the appropriate approvals for.
Okay. Now, is there already a house, is that a building on the upper part, on the bigger land? Yeah.
Yes,
So there's a house on that big, large tract of land?
there is a house on the big, large tract of land.
And so it sounds like from the email we received from them, they were looking to break all of that up into 2 lots. And so could they do that currently if we didn't approve this?
Right now, there is the potential, because there's confusion in the language, that they could get one more lot. What we're trying to do is we're trying to eliminate the confusion and keep the language to be the linear dimension. And really, when you look at lot width states very clearly it's the intersection of the side lot lines with the right-of-way. It doesn't state that you get to count all of the area around a hammerhead. So what we have done is we've taken the definition of lot width and brought it up into frontage and clarified it, and we've added a little bit more definition within that.
Okay. Any other comments? Is there a recommendation?
Do you have a bunch of other ones to go
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, sorry, we're gonna lump all these together.
There is in this bundle, there's the elimination of some verbiage in here that no longer applies. As you'll see that there are several strike-throughs. The term manufacturing, we don't have a heavy manufacturing definition. We use the term industry. Within the manufacturing district, the way that it is currently set up, it puts the definition in the district and the performance standards in the what we feel is they're not in the appropriate code place. So we pulled the definition of light manufacturing into this definition, and we have termed light manufacturing as the use, because we actually have the term light manufacturing in districts, but we don't have the specific definition. So there's a lot of cleaning up within this ordinance where we have terms in certain zones with no definitions, or we have definitions with no terms. So we've been trying to clean up the inconsistencies with this document. Additionally, one of the biggest endeavors was to put a land use table in the ordinance so that when developers and property owners wish to understand, if I have a specific use, which zone can I do it in? And this is a very quick and easy hit, so people can have better access versus looking through paragraph verbiage throughout the ordinance. We have, you'll see within the use section of 301, we have separated out, again, uses that have two terms in them to specifically just call them out as they are defined, which is educational facility and a vocational educational facility versus the term educational/vocational. So those have been just split, but they are defined already. The term hotel, motel, we don't have clarification on a difference between the two. And so we have just stricken the term motel and just stated hotel. And it mentioned about how we have cleaned up the manufacturing district section so that it looks like all the other districts as they are laid out. And then as you're going through the document in Chapter 4, again, that's trying to eliminate the term width to state frontage. And Chapter 5, under subdivision, we were requested by the engineering department to change the datum for our GIS purposes.
Anybody have questions? I have questions. So I noticed that you took out grocery store out of definitions. Is that because it's considered a retail class 1?
Yes.
Okay.
And the true use of that term is in the term neighborhood grocery. So if you look on page 2 of your document, if you look under neighborhood grocery, we took the definition that was previously grocery store and we put those words right into that definition and we eliminated the term grocery store. So it was causing confusion that there was this definition of a grocery store in the ordinance, but we don't have it in any of the zoning districts. And we use the term retail class 1 if we're going to have a grocery store or any type of retail type operation like that. So the only true use of the term grocery store we found was really in that neighborhood grocery definition, and so we substituted the words into that.
And neighborhood grocery is, it says not more than 3,000 square feet of total floor space. So that truly is a smaller market, like a Rosemont market or something like that.
Yes.
And then if it's a larger grocery store like Hannaford or Shaw's, it would go under retail
Retail
class 1. Okay.
Yep.
And then car washes, I'm assuming Tom and Jerry's is grandfathered because they're not going to be, okay, so that's good. My other question is about, and this actually came up recently in my district. I had somebody, and I know we had talked about this, someone had wanted to rent out space in their office building to someone that was going to extract CBD from hemp plants. And they were basically just the extraction. So they were kind of the commercial kitchen extracting and then giving the product back to the person to sell for retail. Is anything like that covered in this?
No.
And are we planning on adding anything like that in here? Because I'm sure it's going to be coming forward at some point.
We need to do some administrative changes to the marijuana ordinance as it has been affected by state law changes.
Okay.
So that is on our radar screen to make adjustments to those.
Okay, great. And that will also, as far as the retail, limited retail uses in here, is that gonna be covered as, like, the marijuana part, is that something completely separate from this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I think that is all I had. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? And those opposed? One opposed, that would be Counselor Riley. Okay, and now North Street no parking zone, land use ordinance amendment.
Oops, shoot, I went way too far. Thank you. As part of the contract zone for 212 Brown Street, one of the conditions within the zoning, it was a requirement from the public safety group that the area along North Street on the, it is specifically the westerly side, that runs along 212 Brown Street, be no parking. The fire department wished to have that be available for fire apparatus in the event of an emergency, so to keep that side of the street clear. This amendment is just to basically codify that code request. So this would go into the uniform traffic ordinance under Schedule 5A. Parking prohibited North Street, westerly side from intersection with Brown Street, 103 feet southerly towards River Street. And I have a picture. Oh, it's not a good one.
Any questions or comments? Counselor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the applicants for the contract zone know that this is coming forth, and
Yes.
there'll be, this signs and stuff will be erected once the council adopts this? Because I think there's parking now there for the business, is that correct?
There is parking that is allowed currently.
Okay, so that business will essentially lose some parking?
Yes. We discussed this quite a bit. Where North Street is an exceptionally wide street, and they do head-in parking on the opposite side, it sort of does balance itself out with the amount of parking that typically otherwise would just be parallel parking along both sides. So at least North Street does have that as an addition.
Understood. I'll make a motion to refer this change to the council.
And I'll second that.
Is there any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Those opposed? We had Counselor Chow opposed. And I think that does it for city planning, is that correct?
Yes, I'm sure you're sick of me.
Well, thank you for all the hard work that you and your staff did, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, event permit ordinance and permit fees.
Back in the fall, we brought forth event permit fees to the committee, which we have included in the packet, and they are on page 59, those fees. And they were tabled until language was proposed for event permits. So we've been working on that, and then it was reviewed by our city attorney. She made some tweaks, and that's what we're bringing forth this evening for language. She recommended that it be added to its own chapter, which she had chapter 39. Since chapter 39 is now something else, so if we do make it its own chapter, it will need to be chapter 40, just as a note. But it may make more sense to be under licenses and permits. The idea behind the language and the event permit process is we're getting more and more events in Westbrook. As a whole, the committee, which is somebody from the clerk's office, Jenny from planning and code, Artie from public works, Captain Goldberg from the police department, Deputy Sloan from the fire department, and Greg Post from the community center has worked together as a group over the last year to review any event that has come forth to the city that we are aware about, to kind of meet with the applicants to review what their plan is for Riverbank Park or street events, or any city-owned property that they're looking to hold an event at. It helps us determine if there's any parking needs, how many people are going to show up to the event, if there's any public services requirements, like cones or anything like that. And it just helps everybody as a whole, all city departments, kind of know what's going on so that we're not getting calls last minute when there's a bunch of people down at Riverbank Park or wherever else trying to run a road race that the city wasn't aware of until last minute. So we have the language forth here. Talks about the application process that anybody who's looking to hold an event has to meet with the event permit committee. And then those fees are proposed still. The one thing it does spell out in here, because I know it was a concern before, is Westbrook Together Days is in our ordinance already under licensing and permits, that they are exempt from permit fees. So that is in this language, or any other city-sponsored event. So that's in there for that.
Any questions? Councilor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If someone submits an application and they feel as if they can't afford it based on what the ordinance says, that it either would hinder the event or something of that nature, can they still submit an application without the fee, or is every application required to have a fee to be entertained by the committee?
So what we have proposed is that the fee would be in place. If they feel that they can't afford it, then it would then be appealed to council, and they would have the opportunity for you guys to then waive that fee. Is in here under that section of fees. It says
Yeah. So they would have to make the application. So, like, for instance, I know that the process is happening right now. The Rotary Club has a road race that they have for high school kids that they make no money from, and they've never paid any fees before. And it was a concern of folks that had made that application that now that there's all these fees associated with it. So they would have to appeal to the city council in
Yes.
order to have those fees waived in advance of their event.
yes.
So that's not something the committee would have the authority to do, or that's not what was proposed, I guess?
It's not what's proposed. We'd rather have every single applicant be treated the same exact way, and then if they couldn't, if the fee couldn't be expended by them, then it would be up to council to waive that fee.
I guess I have a concern with the council being involved in managing such minuscule fees. I think it's just like my same feeling about the community center fees. Like, we have professionals, we have staff people. Like, we shouldn't have to entertain to waive a $200 fee for an event that is going to last a half hour and not cause anyone really any disruption, and not really necessarily need any city services. And there's a lot of those events that happen. So I as the ordinance is written, I guess I'm concerned that it's a minuscule thing for the city council to be involved in trying to manage. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Bryant?
I did not participate in this process intentionally. As I recall, when the council last talked about this, one of the primary concerns was the $200 application fee. And the challenge we have here is the entities that would be applying for this, some would be large and big major events, and some would be relatively small. Most of them, probably all of them, would be nonprofits. Most of them, if not all of them, would be doing the event as a fundraiser. I guess my concerns are twofold. Number one, the $200 fee is at least intended to cover the staff time to review the application. I understand that, but I have a real difficult time with charging. It's not an additional cost. It's basically a fee for the time that people are spending doing this as opposed to doing something else. I think where the easiest movement on here would be to treat everybody the same and basically either not have a fee or make it an incredibly nominal fee, a $25 fee or something like that. I don't care. But I think that in itself is charging for the time of administrative personnel, and it's not like they're working overtime to do this. It's not like there's an expense that you're covering. You're just basically using that as a revenue to cover the activity they're doing on this rather than something else. On the flip side, there are some areas that certain events create expenses. The administrative review of this is not creating an expense for the city. But if we need 3 policemen at intersections, or we need the public services department to put out trash cans and pick them up and dump the trash and all of that, that is an additional expense that's being incurred. The police officers or the public service folks are basically working at an overtime rate in addition to their 40 hours a week. That is money the city has to spend in addition to anything else we're doing. That's not a fee for income, that's a charge to cover the city's cost of doing something. So I really don't like the idea of a $200 fee for everybody coming in the door. I think that we want to welcome events to our community. We want to support nonprofits that are trying to do things to raise funds. I think that is something that I have a real problem with. On the flip side, to the extent an event costs the city additional money, that needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed in one of 2 ways. Either you can charge the person doing the event for that cost, or someone else can pay it. The expense isn't going away. If you need that police officer out there directing traffic on a Saturday, we got to pay that police officer. And it's got to be covered by somebody. It can be covered by the city, or it can be covered by the person holding the event. But we can't make believe it doesn't exist. Because every April we sit here and talk about police and fire overtime. And why is it so high? Well, there's a lot of events that we spend a lot of money on overtime, and that's one of the reasons that's high. And we ignore it, or we consider it in-kind contribution, but the expense doesn't go away. Someone has to pay it to do it. So I don't like the what I consider a very high application fee, but I do think we have to have a formal procedure for recognizing the fact that when events cause additional expenses, the additional expenditures on the part of the city, we've got to formally address that in one way or the other.
Yeah. Counselor Riley?
I think Gary was
Sorry,
first.
Counselor Reardon?
Yes, through you to the security fee and the application fee. So where it says administrative and staff supporting fee, if this was implemented and the services that Mr. Bryan was talking about, police officers, is that in addition to?
Ideally, yes, it was in addition to. There was an application fee, and then if there were police and fire overtime or fire police that were needed to be hired, that comes out of the expense of being billed directly from that department.
Right. So I am involved in a nonprofit, Westbrook Strong, and we actually looked into the banner, and obviously all of our money is donated other than the cost of doing business. And to put the signs up, and I know that's not on here, was $1,000, and plus this would be $200 plus. It's really it's difficult to, if you're looking at $1,500 right off the top, that could be a scholarship for someone. And when you look at other agencies or people that may not have to be able to pay it. We could pay it, but it would just come out of a scholarship fund that would reward a student or something like that. So I personally feel that $200 is a lot. We have done 5 races, and I feel very grateful for the services that we have provided, and our volunteerism is we have over 65 people that help volunteer. We do have some intersections, talking to Captain Goldberg, that they feel is a dangerous intersection per se, and if there's officers available, that they will be at that intersection. If not, we have some folks that have the vests and stuff. So I personally feel that I wouldn't need, or I think we could handle the intersections on our own. So where does that line come from? Is it from the police officers to determine that for the safety? Or is it something that, we don't really need an escort per se, because we do have people doing that. But it does pose a hardship per se, because that's money that could be donated to another type of nonprofit organization. So, but now I'm going to listen to other comments that other people have. Thank you.
Counselor Riley?
Sure. A couple questions. So we're at the end of it, it amends the master fee schedule, and it has a list of things in there. It has a line for administrative and staff support fee. Is that, if it needs 2 police officers, is that line, or what's that line?
Yeah, that's, and it, next to it says actual expenses incurred. That's for police, fire, police, anything like that.
Okay, because the administrative thing seems to be a little confusing, because, so the application fee is supposed to cover administrative review.
That's not, I mean, the application fee, we put an application fee on there. It's not necessarily for the administrative review. While we looked at other communities that had an event permit fee. They range from anywhere from $50 to some of them going from the amount of people that the event is involved in, and could go up to over $1,000 for an event. So that's, we kind of came in the middle of what they were, just because we have been getting so many of them. It wasn't necessarily just to cover the 5 people that sit in the conference room talking to the applicant. It was to have some sort of application fee for these individuals who are looking to reserve the city-owned property and hold an event here.
Okay, so under the administrative and staff support fee line, is if for actual expense incurred. So is there an intent? So again, I get the idea of, if there's police officers or fire or what have you, I get that. Or, public safety, public services for taking trash out, whatever. But is there an intent to charge for administrative review in this? So like on, the 2 hours that you spend reviewing?
That's not what that intended line was for. The intended line for administrative and staff support, where it says actual expenses incurred, is for, like I said, the fire, the police, because they're billed separately from, like, the police have their own hourly line, fire department has their own for fire, police, so it would be however they charged out if there was police officers needed, if there was fire police needed, if there was, the fire department needed to be there for the whole time of the event.
And same for like trash removal or trash pickup or that kind of thing, that would be charged under that line?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so these are all called permit fees. So when we go back up to 39.9, and it says in there about the city council may waive event permit fees.
Mm-hmm.
So this contemplates us being able to waive all of these fees that are listed in this schedule? Okay. So first, it's kind of a rock in the hard place, and I appreciate absolutely all the work that you guys have put into this, and I understand that it's presenting an issue. While it's great to have all these people wanting to have events in our city, it does create a cost that it's got to be paid somehow. So I definitely get that. The big objection that I raised last time that this was before us was about this idea of the council waiving fees, because I don't see any way that doesn't become a debate about who we like better or which group we like better. Because every single group that comes before us, well, I suppose conceivably there might be somebody that comes before us that doesn't come into this, but the majority of people that come before us are going to be nonprofits fundraising. And every single one of them is going to be able to say, just like Gary did, oh, if I didn't have to pay the $500 for this or the $1,000 for that, that would go towards some really good thing. And so then either we would be in a position of just waiving everything every single time, because I don't know how we would justify differentiating between them. You know, some of them might have a little more money and a little more ability to pay than others might have. You know, if the sophomore class is doing a fundraiser and they might not have a great ability to pay, but so I would have a real issue. I would at the very least want to take out the application fee, as Jerry was just talking about, and to take out the language about the city council waiving fees. If we're gonna, and then we need to have a discussion about if we're gonna charge fees or not. And if we're gonna charge fees, then I think then we have to make that decision. And if we're gonna charge them, I would only want to charge them for, as Jerry was saying, the stuff where we are really out of pocket on. And that's just a decision we have to make if either we're going to do that or we're not. But I would not want us to get into on a case-by-case basis.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Well, Ann agrees with me, so I'm going to shut up now.
Counselor Chow?
Absolutely right.
Yes, yes, thank you about this bringing this up. I really think we need something like this in our ordinance. We can't just have everyone that wants to fundraise come to the city of Westbrook and, you know, I really want a Lamborghini, and I'm gonna hold a 5K every weekend until I get that Lamborghini. I want William Clark Drive shut down, I want Main Street shut down, I want 302 shut down, and any other main corridor shut down so I could run my race, so I can run on the yellow line. It's called the Yellow Line 5K. And we can't be spending all these city services and spending all our money getting all this overtime. It's not feasible. We have to draw the line somewhere. We can't give everything away. I understand that, like, Together Days is a really great event. I ran the 5K. I was chair of the 5K, and I can tell people that I've been in several 5Ks. I've ran several 5Ks. Not from running. I just ran the event. So, but I do have that stature. Anyways, and I do appreciate the police there. I do appreciate the firemen. I do appreciate everyone there who's helping me run this race, and we're making money to ensure future Together Days. And it's all good, but you know, in the end, we had to pay for T-shirts, we had to pay for bottles of water, we had to pay for all this stuff. And you know, I could go to I can go to these other people and say, you know, this ensures the future Westbrook Together Days. Why don't you give me those T-shirts for free? Because you know, I don't know where do we draw the line? If we're going to need a lot of people, a lot of our staff there, and it helps the event, and sure it's a fundraiser, and sure it's a good cause, but where do we, we just can't. Why don't we just open up this general fund and just write a check instead of holding the event? That may be quicker and easier, and have less overtime. So, I really think we need this. We need this event ordinance, and honestly, I don't think it's gonna, the way it's going, I don't know how it's gonna go, but, this is only for events on city-owned property. The ordinance that you forwarded to us in the draft is, from Scarborough, is for all events.
That's
if
for
I
the,
want-
that's
Talking
for
two
the
different
next
things.
item.
Oh, is the next?
That's
That's
the
the
mass
mass
gathering
gathering.
ordinance.
Mass gathering, oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, so basically, I would like to see us knowing what's gonna happen, how many staff we need, and provide the safety. If we're gonna have a race in the middle of our city, the event committee staff needs to get together and needs to say, here's what we need for the event, for the participants of this event to be safe. And we're gonna need, 3 fire trucks, 6 patrolmen, whatever it is. And we need to prepare so that we're ready for this event, so everyone's safe. It's not good business to have an event where people are running across William Clark Drive at the middle of rush hour and with no police staff there, making sure that people can cross safely. We need to be prepared so we can have things happen. And we absolutely need to do these fees to charge, to make sure that we're not left, basically, we're a fundraiser. We're a non-willing participant in this fundraiser. We're actually writing a check. We should be listed as the top sponsor on the T-shirt if we're gonna give everything for free. I don't think the taxpayers want us to sponsor every event. And if everyone knows that we're sponsoring every event for free, every event will be happening every day in Westbrook because they're all free. So I agree with Councilor Riley that these need to be charged. And we shouldn't be able to waive each one. I really would like the committee to waive whatever they need to waive. If the committee wants to waive the application fee, then let them, and keep it out of our hands. We can't be stuck in meetings every day with waiving free events. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks.
And I love this ordinance. Maybe the application fee is too high, or maybe it can be refunded. Say, hey, we feel that whatever the fee is, that, you don't need it. You're a standing event, and here's the application fee back, or something like that. But we need to know how many people or how many of our staff are involved in these events, and we need to prepare for them, so everyone in that event is safe, and it's not free. We're paying money. Thank you.
Counselor Reardon. Oh, Counselor Peoples. Has everybody else already commented at least once besides Counselor Peoples?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to have Counselor Peoples, and then I have some comments,
Okay.
and we'll go back for second
So,
comments.
here's the plan.
Kat?
We drop the $200 application fee, and we put together a list of what it's realistic to expect in administrative staff support fees. Because at this point, what does an average road race cost in overtime? It's all going to be pretty much the same amount. If people know ahead of time, this is what the fees are, then they are going to walk in knowing that's what the fees are, and that's what they're going to pay. At this point, this is one big black hole, and that is not a good idea. I think what we need is to go back and figure out what fees are there going to be. Let's put together a menu of what there is, what we're going to require, what they can have if they would like to, that would be nices, and what those things are going to cost them. And then just get rid of the application fee, because that serves no purpose except for them to prove that they're serious.
Okay. I just have a couple of questions. You had mentioned Westbrook Together Days is already exempt in another section of the ordinance. Do you have that ordinance, what section that is?
It's in the license, it's in chapter 20, it's in licensing and
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious what that language says. And then in this event permit ordinance, it talks about food vendors needing to have a permit as well. So does that apply to Westbrook Together Days, or is that exempt for that as well?
So last year, we met with Westbrook Together Days, and we didn't require any of them to get permits. Ideally, they're serving food down in the park. The way our ordinance is written, and Natalie's not here tonight, but it sounded like we couldn't charge anything for that because it's stated right in there that they're exempt from all of that.
Okay.
So this is in section 20-32 of our code, license required. It says nonprofit organizations such as but not limited to church fairs, sporting events, and school-sponsored activities, and all vendors operating on a temporary short-term basis, such as for Westbrook Together Days and similar community celebrations, fairs, and parades, shall not require a license, but shall be subject to inspections by the code enforcement officer and fire department. And so this is listed underneath food service establishment specifically.
So if we're going to have this event permit ordinance, we probably will need to amend that to state except as otherwise required by the event permit ordinance, because if you're talking about all these nonprofits, it sounds like by that language, they would be exempt from this, right? From the event permit
Just for licenses.
license?
It's just for licenses. That's why Natalie proposed it be its own chapter, so that it doesn't get confused with licensing.
Okay. Okay.
And that's for like food service establishment licensing, business licensing section.
Yeah,
only.
I just don't want any confusion. If somebody read that, they'd think they would be exempt from any license.
Right, and that's why
And
she.
so I guess this is why this is a permit, not a license. I guess that's the difference. What was the other question I had? It talks about a security deposit, but it doesn't talk about when a security deposit would be needed.
So there's an application which didn't get included in the packet. I think you guys had seen it in the fall. And it's a refundable security deposit, which if fees were implemented, require everybody to submit so that if there was any damage done to the property, that security deposit would not be refunded back.
So you're proposing they do the application fee plus a $500 security deposit, no matter the size of the event? Okay, that's not good. And then, does this apply to weddings in Riverbank Park? If you have a couple that just want to go get married and have a few people, they've got to go through this whole process too?
No, because the weddings were,
This is getting way too complicated.
you have a handful of people that show up at the gazebo, and that's first come, first serve. This is them actually coming in forth with a plan of what type of event is. So weddings weren't part of this, no.
Do we need to specify something about that? Because this talks about any event that happens on city property.
This is meant to be the specific reservation of public land. So if I want to have Riverbank Park all to myself, then I have to go through this event committee. If I want to take a chance and go and get married at Riverbank Park and there's a whole bunch of people around me, then this committee doesn't see them. But if you want sole reservation of public property, that was the intent of what the permit process was to be.
Well, so I'm thinking these 5Ks though, you're not the only ones in the park.
No.
So if a 5K is going to be held,
No, but you'd
There
the
might
only-
be public.
you'd be the only one on the street.
On the
Right.
streets where you
You're
have to
running on the road.
I don't know. That sounds like a sticky wicket. Counselor Reardon.
Thank you. First of all, I am pretty close to this because I do actually run a 5K. So, first of all, and I'm going to speak to my event, each and every year, we have always put the Westbrook seal on our shirts, no questions asked. We, again, are very grateful for the facilities and the involvement from the community and some of the Westbrook services. It cost about, for us to put on a total of a 3-hour road race, $5,100, that's with shirts and everything else and prizes. On top of that, we have to take a $1 million insurance policy for an hour race, which we do. And as far as all these fees go, it's a lot, and I have never been one to be exempt, but if Westbrook Strong is paying this, then other people pay it, because the impact is just as important for us to have this fee. So instead of $5,100, it may be $6,100 or $6,500 to do. The security deposit, we have a kitty right now that we could come up with that, and then we'd get it back, because after the race, all of the money goes to the endowment. But I'm thinking of the Westbrook Together Days. That's the event. They have a road race. To me, that isn't included. That's something separate that they wanted to do. So when you look at the full package, they don't always do a road race. You look at the Kiwanis or the Rotary Club, you know, it costs them money to put that on. It is. It's a rock and a hard place, because I would much rather say, you know what, would you donate? And we'd probably donate maybe $250, $300 as a donation. Thank you. But for us to waive different organizations up here, I don't think that's the way to go either, because, you know, it's very hard to say no to someone. But on the other hand, I can tell you on this year, July 13th, we're going to have the race regardless. And I can tell you that the downtown businesses or the supermarket, things like that, we bring in about, I'd say, 550 people. And they eat and they do things in Westbrook. So when you look at what it's costing, and again, Councilor Chow said, you know, close down William Clark Drive, close down 302. I have sat with this very organized board, and they would never let an event like that happen. So when you sit down with all the department heads, Artie and the city clerk's office and the police and the fire, and it's very strategic, and they want everyone to be safe. That doesn't mean a police officer needs to be at every single intersection that you have 2 fire trucks in these events. Do they hang out down to the park at Westbrook Together? Yes, because it's for Westbrook Together Days. But there is some services that are needed, and then there's some that are not. I've seen road races that don't have any police. So it is, when you see that line that doesn't have anything on there, it is kind of, it's almost like if you buy a car and you don't know how much it is, and then you finally get there and you empty your pocket. So, and to be honest, I don't know how, even if I should vote on this, because I am that close. It is a huge part of my life of this. I would like to be selfish and say, I don't want to pay anything. You know, I pay city taxes and things like that, but that's not fair, because we do have other agencies and the police and the fire. But I can tell you, when we pack up our race down to Riverbank Park at 11 o'clock that morning, you'd never, ever, ever know that there was a race that took place. Thank you.
Councilor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I apologize I wasn't here when this was first brought up, or I would have raised much more opposition. I appreciate all the work that everyone did, and I mean no disrespect by this, but I honestly think that this entire process is a significant unnecessary burden on community events. I know Mr. Bryant referred to us having overtime costs with police, and we talk about the overtime budgets. We saw Detective Close come here and present an emergency cost, and these costs are minuscule compared to the costs. I know it's overtime and it's time and a half and different things, but I think over the years we've spent a lot of time with a lot of Council Hera's initiatives trying to pass along fees where we feel like it's appropriate and where fees can be shared with other people. I think community events, and Councilor Chow talked about drawing a line, maybe we draw a line and say nonprofit community organizations and for-profit business organizations, and have a separate ordinance or have a separate application process to affect each of those, because I think events that we have in this community, like the Westbrook Strong 5K, like Westbrook Together Days, those are like the fabric of our community. And if we start nickel and diming the fabric of our community, I feel like it really, those things should be minimal costs that we absorb in our city budget in order to allow those community events to happen. And that's how it's happened for years. I completely agree. We should have a process, ensure there's reservation, ensure maybe an application so you get details and you have all the facts. You get the staff together, which has been happening. But we've been having races or having events in this community for decades without incident, like Councilor Chow suggests we may have. And so I'm confident in the professional staff of our city to ensure that these things, go off without a hitch. And I think that's just something that we accept as leaders, that our staff is going to be used to sometimes help support events, and we need to determine. So I don't know if this event ordinance gets referred back to you guys and you do a little bit more work based on the concerns that people have raised. But, I definitely, if someone's running a for-profit event, if somebody wants to throw up a carnival at Riverbank Park separate from Westbrook Together Days, and they're going to make money and there's no other community organization involved and things like that, then there maybe should be an application process and a security deposit and use of electricity and things of that nature. But when community organizations like nonprofits and school groups and things like that are having events, I don't think they should be burdened with some of these significant things that are reflected on this ordinance. So I can't support this ordinance moving it forward as it is today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions,
Yeah,
comments?
Madam
Councilor
Chair, on this event, in this line, I'm actually gonna recuse myself of
Okay.
taking part. I probably shouldn't have taken part in the negotiation of it, but if it goes to the city council, I'd probably be at the podium. So.
Okay. I just have a couple other comments. It says in here they must have adequate liability insurance, and I'm just wondering what's adequate? Should we have like a specific amount in there like we do for other things?
There is. It's on the application fee. We took it out of what's in the licensing portion. It's $400,000 for the liability insurance, and have City of Westbrook named as additional insured on it.
Okay.
And that was from Natalie specifically.
Okay. And so should we have that in the actual ordinance and not just on the application so that people know? Or
I think there's a line in there that says
it just says
something.
adequate liability insurance. It doesn't have a specific amount. So we just might want to add that in if we're going to do that. And then I guess I'm just curious about how many events would you say annually you guys are having to get together as a committee to meet with?
Last year, I have about 20 that we met with last year, and
20.
right now we've already met with 5 for this coming summer.
And rough estimate, what would you say it costs the city approximately in staff cost to work with the event, depending on what it is?
It's really, it's event by event. It's really hard to say because, like a couple of people have pointed out, not all road races or events require police or anything like that. I know Artie helps out a lot with dropping off cones and various other things that they do that they necessarily don't have to do, but they do it anyway. And it does come as a cost. I don't know if you can really pinpoint down what that is. I think it's important if you guys choose not to have any sort of fees associated with this whatsoever, that we do keep the application process and have it in the ordinance that the events do meet with the group, because that's the only way police, fire, dispatch is going to know that there is an event going on. If not, anybody can just show up any day and have anything, if we don't have anything in place for them to fill out.
Before, I would like to see the city costs covered, even for fundraisers or nonprofits. Westbrook Together Days, we find sponsors to cover the expenses of the things that we have to pay for. And I don't feel that the city should be brunting the cost of having our staff fund these events that are happening, especially if it's gonna be more and more and more, which I definitely see happening down the road. I just, before I voted on anything, I mean, I definitely feel the application fee is too high. I would like to kind of see like an average of what it might cost us per event. And are we talking 1,000? Are we talking a couple hundred? I mean, I guess that's what I would want to know before I decided. And I know it's a wide range, but, Mr. Bryant?
What I had planned to do, regardless of how this turns out, is we're going to have a line item in the budget this year. And it's going to be for events. And it's just going to be what we pay for the police officer or the fire or the rescue person or any type of a cost we incur. And we're not going to bury it in the police department budget or bury it in the fire department budget. We're going to have it right in the mayor's office budget. And when I say mayor's office budget, that includes the 7 of you two. Okay, it's all in one budget, council and the mayor. We're going to spend it out of that account. So every year, we're going to know there's nothing wrong with the city spending money on that as long as you know you're doing it.
Right.
You can waive a fee. You can't waive an expense. Someone has to pay it. And if we're going to pay it, that's a policy decision that this council can make. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. But we're going to account for it. And so a year from now, when we're sitting here, I'm going to be able to say whether or not we spent $5,000 or $10,000 or $30,000 for services to accommodate events.
Right.
And whether or not a portion of that expense, I don't think there should be, I'm saying there's two different categories. There's expense and there's fees. Okay, expenses need to be covered.
Well, and also during the budget process, we have social service agencies that come to us and ask for money to support their services. And it would be helpful to have a line item to say how much are we actually spending to support these nonprofit agencies that are coming in to hold these events, because that's a social service, part of our budget. So we've had a lot of concern and a lot of discussions over the past couple of years since I've been here about who gets how much money, and we really need to consider that too, because if now we're saying the bulk of these events are being put on by nonprofits and for fundraising, that's social services, in my eyes.
Okay.
Because they want to take their money and they want to donate it to scholarships or whatever they want to donate it to, well, then I guess we're supporting those social service agencies. So, Counselor Riley?
How many of these events are actually held, there was a mention of for-profit and non-for-profit. Are any of these events held by for-profit entities?
No.
Yeah, they're all nonprofits, right? So just to kind of move things along hopefully a little bit, is at the very least, it sounds like we need to have the non-fee portions of this in place. All the other stuff in here besides the fees, the application process, the grouping, at the very least, we need to move that forward for you. And then there's a question whether we have the fees included, or some fees included and not others, or what have you. Because we're in committee and not at the council level, I can't even recall now. Do we have a pending motion to?
No,
Okay.
no, we don't.
Okay. I'm willing to move this along to the city council. That being said, I'm not yet ready to support the fee portion of this, and we may want to remove that. But I think it would be good to have that discussion
At the council level.
at the council, and we can pull out the fee portion, we can vote the whole thing down, we can change it, we can do whatever. So I don't want I'm gonna move to forward it along, we'll see what happens. So I don't want that to be read as that I actually support this as it's drafted, because I don't. There's changes that I definitely want to make to it, including us, as I mentioned earlier, picking, between the groups, but,
So-
Jenny's got it.
Yeah, Jenny?
Just a point to be made about some of the applications, not all of the applications are Westbrook-based organizations. We have people coming from outside of our community coming in to run road races for their specific organizations, and they're not Westbrook-based organizations. But we can't right now differentiate between a Westbrook organization and a non-Westbrook organization unless, if, as part of the fee schedule, and this would be a bigger conversation for you later, as to whether all non-residents would pay the full freight as to what's being currently shown by Ashley, and then the resident or community organization can have lesser fees, like whether you want to take off some of those things and maybe only pay actual cost or take the whole thing down. That could be an option, understanding that we're still going to document it on Jerry's end in the budget, but that might be a way. I think as a Westbrook resident, I don't think Portland should be coming into our community and utilizing our staff's time to have an event that is not going to be Westbrook centric.
So I wasn't aware of any of that, so.
That's why I said it. I wanted to make sure.
Non-Westbrook,
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
The less you charge, the more you're gonna have.
For example,
This is true.
the reason why some of the
So-
road races are coming here is because
We don't charge anything.
I don't want to harp on Portland, but Portland charges a hefty fee for reservation of their parks or races or anything like that. So we're getting a lot of inquiries to move their events from Portland to Westbrook and hold them in Riverbank Park because right now we have no fee.
that's good to know.
The other,
Mr. Bryan?
the other gray area is going to be, because many of these are agencies or entities that do broad work, they're not, they're not Westbrook and Portland and Scarborough, they're a regional agency.
Right.
Boys and
So
Girls Club.
it's not gonna be quite as black and white as you'd like to have it. So that's one way to differentiate certainly, but once we start actually doing it, there's gonna be a lot of post office boxes in Westbrook taken out.
Right.
And say, well, I'm a Westbrook-based
That's
entity.
cheaper than all that other thing, isn't it?
Right.
But there's gonna be a challenge to administer that as well, even if we do try to draw a line as far as resident, non-resident, if you will, because most of these people aren't individuals, they're entities, organizations.
Right.
And some of them serve just one community, but most of them serve the region.
Right. For example, the one we met with last week is their foundation is the Scleroderma Foundation of New England. So she was based out of Topsfield, Massachusetts. And she had a conference call with us, submitted her application. We went over everything with her via the phone. It's a walk that kind of goes around the boardwalk through some of the neighborhoods and back in. And they're looking to have food vendors inside the park and that sort of thing. And their expected attendance is 150 to 200 people.
All right.
Small numbers, but it's not a Westbrook-based organization.
I can't
So,
imagine.
so I was about to make a motion to forward this along, but I think maybe we need to keep this here at the committee, and we've given some guidance, because I'd like to have, before we actually send this one up, I'd actually like to have some different language in here. I'd like us to look at, my preference would be, and obviously I'm just one, but to make, I think one line that we can distinguish on is whether you are a Westbrook-based organization or not, and we can get into how to define that. But I think the concern that everyone raises about this is, again, while all these groups are I'm sure doing good work, Mike was talking about, protecting the fabric of the community, and when we talk about protecting the fabric of Westbrook, we're talking about groups that are Westbrook-based, like Gary's, like the other days, like some of the others. And so I would prefer to keep that here and have it come back to us with drawing a line like that. Where we get into, where we don't charge, and maybe for now, we don't charge anything to Westbrook-based organizations, and we'll figure out how to define that. But we charge a schedule of fees to non-Westbrook-based organizations. Something along those lines would be my preference.
Council Chow?
Did you have a question?
Artie?
I don't want to prolong this any longer, but I just want to tell you that when somebody asks for a wedding at the park, that looks really nice and it's simple, but it causes public services to take some action on Friday. We've had to have call-ins for supervisors to come back and reset the power because they blew the circuit breakers, or that's also another one that has always surprised me, is they'll get a hold of Ashley and they'll say, we want to reserve the park for Sunday from noon to 4 and we need power. Okay, well, we could get down there and, vandalism, we could be putting in 4 or 5 outlets, and we've done hundreds of them over the years.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, all those things, they cause more action. A 5K causes us on Friday sometimes to go sweep the 5K route. Together Days causes us to go down the whole route and check for potholes, along with sweeping the parade route before and after the parade, and the same with the Memorial Day parade that comes down Longfellow. So these things cause us to do things too. And we also were getting so many events that Ashley created a calendar for the things we approved, because it's getting lost in the shuffle for us with all the events we have going tacked on with those, so.
Yes,
Thank
this was brought up last year, and I believe Mr. Bryant said the reason why we're getting so many applications is it's so cheap to do an event here, that we're getting, we're sponsoring Portland Together Days. And because it's cheaper to do it here, we're not charging any fees, and so we can't be sponsoring all these events. Now, I didn't mean to construe that Councilor Reardon's 5K event was one of the things I was talking about. He actually runs a really nice event, amazing stuff, amazing support for the community. One of the best events we have in our community, and I want to thank him for doing such a great job. But my concern is, by waiving everything and saying it's all good, everything should be free, is that I brought up things that on the other end of the spectrum of what Councilor Reardon is doing, the bad groups or whoever they are that are abusing us and taking advantage of our charity, of our goodness. We can't be doing this. So my fear is, with keeping this in committee, is that we're going to draw a line here in the sand. Unfortunately, right now there's 5 different lines in the sand, or 6 different lines in the sand, and not sure where they don't know where to go. So at what point do we maybe we put this back in committee and we may talk about this next year, and the year after that. We have 20 events planned so far, and they're not all like Gary's events. And we need to do something about it sooner than later. So my fear of keeping this in committee and telling them to come back with a better proposal, when I don't think they understand, I don't know if they know what a better proposal is, because we really haven't given direction.
That's very true.
So I really feel that we should do something rather than nothing, and not be sponsoring Portland Together Days. So, thank you.
Councilor Peoples?
How about if we just ask them to come back and give us some ballpark figures on what administrative staff support fees look like?
As it pertains to that particular thing, every organization has an hourly rate, and we have hourly rate sheets, but it would depend obviously on how many hours in which that you're going to operate, and we really don't have like one specific fee that would be like, if you're doing a 5K, it's just this one fee.
Well, this is why I'm thinking that, when you have a road race, obviously you're not going to have a cop standing on every street corner for 2 hours. It's going to be a much shorter period of time than that. If you could just have, that looks like a big black hole. People have no idea what they're going to be facing. And there's got to be a way to kind of quantify this, at least within the realm of the ability for people to comprehend.
We can put together, we can take a look at a couple road races and see what the police requirement
What's
was
the
or something
average?
beyond that, and say, okay, a road race
Typically.
costs between X and Y.
Yeah, typically
And,
costs.
take 2 or 3 different types of events and give you a feel for that. It isn't that everyone's gonna cost that much, because there's gonna be variations, but give you a little feel for what that type of cost is gonna be, to make these a little more real numbers.
Yeah, I think that would certainly give me more sense of comfort with what we're asking people to do. And when they come in to fill out the application, it would, if they got a copy of the application and looked at it, they'd know whether or not they could afford to come in and fill it out.
We just wouldn't want to codify that number, though, in the ordinance.
Oh.
It would just be a, it would just be a range that you'd, okay.
But it would be a range within a, obviously, it wouldn't be 0 to 1,000. It would be more like 0 to 10.
Counselor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a way that we could refer this forward and have the administration bring this forward with, where, under section 39.9, with a waiver of fees that says something to the effect of fees will not be applied to local Westbrook community groups or something like that, and then everything else be the same, and then that the fees are in place, so to Ashley's point about these groups coming in from the community, then those organizations, if they want to appeal their fee to the city council, then we can entertain those here at the city council for people that are outside of our community. There won't be as many, but it will help to move forward the process based on the concern that Ashley brought up, that there's these organizations having events here because there's no charge anywhere else. Does that seem fair, Mr. Bryant?
We can do something like that.
So all the,
I
all the groups,
I
all the
understand.
groups we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
like,
I understand. I hear what everybody's saying, and I think there's some answers to that. I'm still hung up on the difference between a fee and a cost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay.
No, but I think-
and we gotta keep those separate, no matter what we do with any one
I
of them.
think there's a general consensus up here. I know I feel this way, that we're willing to absorb the expenses for Westbrook community events as appropriate. Like if they have one police officer for a 5K or some public works for Together Days or whatever, as a community event, because I think, to your point, that budget line is going to be helpful, because I think we're going to be spending a very, very, very small percentage of our nearly $60 million budget
absolutely.
on events. And I think that is a very, very necessary expense for our community to share in, to help sponsor community events. Events that are happening outside of our community, I think we should have something in place, and if they want to ask for a waiver, we can entertain those. But I think that there's a lot of community organizations that haven't been paying fees today and haven't necessarily been sharing in expenses, and those have just been sponsored by the community, and there's never been any objection until now. I think the reason that Ashley brings up about people coming here from outside the community is more alarming to me, that's why we need fees. So if you can structure that language to say something to the effect of, for local Westbrook community groups, nonprofit community groups, and then everything else will apply to businesses and outside of Westbrook community groups. Does that seem reasonable?
We can work on it.
So I'll make a motion to that effect, that we refer this to the city council based on the suggestions that I brought up to have that language changed, and the same thing with the fee schedule, and we could see that draft at a future council meeting.
Is there a
I'll
second on that?
As long as you put in my idea about
We're probably talking, not this coming Monday, but the following, we get 2 Mondays in a row, we got meetings, 'cause we got the 25th and we got the 4th. We're probably talking the 4th, not the 25th here.
Whenever you're ready. I think
Yeah.
it helps to delay it less by moving
Right.
it forward. And you've heard
No, you're
all
right.
the feedback that everyone's talked about here, tried to incorporate, except everything Council Chow said. No, I'm just kidding. Incorporate the fair concerns that everyone had in order to bring a reasonable solution. I think that helps us to move it forward.
Is there
And
any-
then we can hash it out when at the council if it's not as we hoped.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I'll definitely support that. I still, and we can hash this out at the council level, I still don't think that we should be, I think if there are fees, there should be fees. Even, I mean, for the non-Portland, I mean, for the category that you're talking about, that we talked about earlier, I don't think we should be hearing appeals on fees, because there still isn't a standard to really apply in those. So if we're gonna, I think we should draw a line, and that line should be Westbrook and non-Westbrook, and whatever fee we charge for non-Westbrook is the fee that gets charged.
That's what I was
Yeah.
describing.
All right.
All right,
We can do that.
so, all those in favor of that motion? And any opposed? And Counselor Reardon is recused on that, abstained.
He's recused.
Yep. Okay. Moving right along, mass gathering ordinance.
Let's hope people.
Who wants to take this up? Mr. Bryant?
Regulating masses now?
I guess so. Do they
This is a
Latin?
good, wasn't as good agenda as I thought it was. I mean, geez. We've had discussions, I've heard from a few different counselors, and have talked a lot with staff about our ability to deal with large events. And we're not talking about necessarily in the city park, we're not talking about nonprofit exclusively, we're talking about large events. And certainly the discussion intensified when we were dealing with the concert venue at Rock Row. I just want to assure you, because that project had to go through the planning board process, we have a tremendous number of safeguards and requirements that in this case, the business or the promoter cover the city costs incurred. I've got a copy of the planning board decision and rulings. I'll get that out to everybody so you can specifically see the things that are built into that approval process, because it went through a site plan review process with the planning board. I think what we gotta be concerned about is if something were to happen that didn't go through a planning board process. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, and I think the world of the Pride's Corner Drive-In, and I hope it's a drive-in theater as long as I live. But I'm gonna use this as an example because it's a potential where a major event could happen without having to go through planning board. That facility is licensed as a theater.
Yes,
That's
it
the
is.
land use code. It's a permitted use in that zone. If someone wanted to have a concert there, they wouldn't have to go to planning board probably. I mean, it depends a little bit on the size, magnitude, and crowd, but you could have a major event at that location without really requiring much as far as planning board approval, depending on whether you had food service or things like that. But they've got a concession stand. Thank you.
Concessions license, yeah.
So, I think we do need to have some structure. Should an event, I'm not picking on Pride's Corner Drive-In, it's just that's the perfect example of where an existing facility could host something like this, and there'd be minimal controls that we have in place right now. So I think we've got to put together a structure like this. What we did provide to you was an example. We looked at different communities, and Scarborough was sort of the most comprehensive. And so what we wanted to show you, not saying we wanted to adopt Scarborough's ordinance, but to say, here's the range of the type of things that could be discussed or could be regulated in this type of an ordinance, just to give you a feel for it a little bit. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think we need to have that ordinance, but I do think we have to have something in place that would catch this type of event that would occur. And I think, even in Scarborough's ordinance, is it 1,000?
It's 1,000, yeah.
That's a big event. Okay? I mean, that's very significant. And there aren't a lot of places, we could probably have, an outdoor concert in someone's, the Paulson Farm, or something like that, just to pick on Beth for a second.
When Victor has his rave.
Yeah, we call it Brookstock. But we need to put something together from a structural standpoint. And so we wanted this on just to report back to the council that we've been doing some research, we've been thinking about it, we certainly talked with the public safety folks in particular, because that's where, particularly relate back to the concert venue we're talking about right now, there's gonna be a lot of law enforcement people there. There's gonna be a lot down at Westbrook law enforcement people, because we couldn't probably staff that. Could we?
Most times, these events are held during the busier time of our season, and with the city ordinance that requires officers at 13 key arterials for any type of road construction, as well as the peak time for vacations and filling overtime jobs and patrol, it makes it very, very difficult for us to staff with what we have currently for staffing.
I wasn't suggesting we were deficient in any way, I'm just saying the pure numbers, we would have a very difficult time covering this through extra overtime shifts just with our own workforce. And the chiefs are working with other communities, and it's all gonna work out, and we're gonna be in fine shape. But, in the case of Rock Row, it's very, very clear in the planning board approvals that they're paying that cost. So it's not like, gee, something's gonna come along and catch us unprepared. That's not the event, because they went through planning board. There's the potential that other things could happen, or other events could get organized, and we need that safety net, I think, in place. Again, I don't think we need something as extensive as what Scarborough has, but I think we do need something in place. So, I guess what I'm telling you is we're gonna start working on that, and maybe come back at another point in time saying, okay, here's what we sort of roughed out as to what we think for a base safety net in Westbrook we need in place. So that's sort of where we are in this item.
Counselor Chow?
Yes, through you to the administration. Now, why don't, what's wrong with it that we just don't adopt the ordinance? It talks about sanitation, it talks about water, it talks about sound, it talks about safety. It's very long.
That's one reason we don't adopt it.
Yes, but it covers so much. I suppose we could spend our time and write new ones, but or have something written. Maybe it's easier to adopt it.
I have a comment about that. I mean, I'm looking at the first page, and it says mass gathering area is to occur within an established permanent stadium, arena, auditorium, or other similar permanent building that is fully enclosed by a roof, walls, and floor. So
That's what's exempt.
Yeah.
that's exempt?
That's
Yeah.
what's exempt. That's what's not covered.
Oh, that's just the definitions. Okay.
That's what's not covered.
So that's not covered. So, okay. So like when I was first city clerk, we had a guy came in and wanted to have a circus down off from Saunders Way, and we
Yep.
didn't have any type of mass gathering
Right.
ordinance. He could have done that. He didn't even have to get our permission to do it,
No,
because
he's
he
doing
was
it on private
renting the
property.
space from private property.
Yep.
Okay, so definitely we need it.
Yeah.
I think this ordinance is way too long, but, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It needs
Anybody else
something.
have any comments? So you're just gonna work on it and come back? Perfect,
That's the plan.
great.
Are you gonna bring
Make
it to
it
the city
sound-
council, or are you back here?
Back here. All right, no motion is needed, so let's move on to the next one, sewer ordinance amendments.
Beat that poor girl up.
It's very far away. This is basically the majority of the sewer ordinance has not been updated since 1977. So I thought it was about time we updated some language. There's a lot of language that referred to combined sewer and sanitary sewer and stormwater, which is against the law now. And just some outdated practices that, like cast iron being connected in the sewer, is definitely not required anymore. And most of it's pretty straightforward, if you have any questions.
Counselor Foley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I almost call you Madam Clerk a few times.
I know, it's okay.
It's hard to remember.
I'm so used to it in the past. everything does seem pretty straightforward. I did notice there was a lot of places where you were striking out the Parks and Cemeteries Director, and I did see that left in a few places. So I didn't know. I'm trying to find
Are
exactly.
you in the right
So
order?
next one.
Yeah, that might be the
We're talking
cemetery.
Oh,
one.
maybe in the, yes, it was left in the cemetery one.
That's the next item.
Yep, sorry, I was reading into them, so.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to refer this to City Council for approval.
Okay, and there's a second by Counselor Reardon. Any further questions? Yep, Counselor Riley?
What's a Y, W-Y-E?
It's one of the ways you can connect into a sewer. It's just,
Yeah, yeah.
Does it look like a Y?
It looks like
A
Yeah.
little bit, yeah.
Okay.
it's at an angle.
Why? Why?
Why?
Oh, but
Why?
if it had Y like in quotation marks, I would have understood it. But I wondered what Y with W-Y-E was.
Counselor Peoples?
It's interesting, I went to a presentation at noontime today by the, one of the environmental organizations, and they were talking about the improved water quality in all of the rivers, and they're increasing some of the standards on some of the rivers up north. And I said, well, what about the Presumpscot River in Westbrook? And they said, well, you guys have done such a wonderful job. You're Class B, and even if you got all of your combined sewer overflow, which you've done a wonderful job on, by the way.
Thank you.
I thought I would bring that back to you. You probably, because of the stuff that ends up in the water anyway, you'd never get to A. But I thought that was very nice. We got a very nice compliment.
Nice. Anybody else?
Sewer people don't get compliments often.
Nobody really
Try
cares
and
about
share
it.
them when you can.
Thanks for asking Counselor Riley about it, 'cause usually I don't get any questions.
Counselor Riley?
So I have to say, and I'm not going to read it, but section 2629 on prohibited waste has the best list of words you don't ever want to see anywhere.
Yeah, you're
in
right.
it, including paunch manure and lime slurries. By the way, it would be a great name for a band and a drink.
I thought about eliminating some of them, but I was like, I'll just keep them in there, just in case.
There's probably a whole bunch of words in there that aren't really things, right? You just put them in there because we're never going to ask.
Well, sups was in there, so I assumed it was cups.
Hair and fleshings.
Yeah.
I'm thinking those words might be a little old. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we have a motion by Counselor Foley and seconded by President Reardon to refer to the council. All those in favor? Any opposed? All those in favor? Good. And now we're on to the next one. Cemetery ordinance amendments. Artie Ledoux.
So I'm here tonight representing the Cemetery Board of Trustees, and we, one of the projects we worked on in 2018 was amending the Parks and Cemetery Ordinance chapter in the city ordinance. I'm not sure the last time that this was looked at. However, I like to phrase most of what we did as some housekeeping, cleaning up the language, and making it sort of fit what we do today. I had back and forth with Natalie, the city attorney, and so we could bounce this off of each other. And I'm ready to entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions?
So my comment from the last one would apply.
And what was your comment again?
There was a couple of places where I still saw the Parks and Cemeteries person listed. Trying to find the page.
There's a
On-
753, Mike.
Yeah, 753. Yeah, Director of Parks and Cemeteries, and then also on 764, through the authority, the Director of Parks and Cemeteries, so if those are just fixed for the final, I'll make a motion to refer that to the council.
Second.
Okay. there any other questions? I had a question about the Board of the Trustees, responsibilities. You've deleted that. Is there a reason why?
Yes. When we looked at that, Council Adams, as you know, I've been here 18 years. I've been involved with the trustees since 2007, and we just don't do that. We don't do what that says. That being said, between myself and probably the finance director, we would be able to provide you with this information in short order in the event you wanted to know about that stuff. But the trustees they just found it to be obsolete and they don't do it, so, and I was able to explain to them what I just explained to you about the administration being able to fill the gaps where this is not.
As originally
realistic.
structured, this was an incredibly autonomous group, and we've spent a lot of years tracking down bank accounts that the city's finance director never knew existed. That was set up, appropriately so, and the person who may have been serving as the treasurer at that time either moved on, went south, passed away. We actually had a couple of cases where we had to go through a process because there was no one that had signature authority over the account because they weren't alive anymore. So a lot of, I think what Artie's talking about is stuff that's now handled in a very different fashion than it was when this ordinance was first drafted. When you went down to the local bank and did your business and everybody knew who everybody else was. And now it's handled administratively, so that, the trustees are saying, not only we don't do it, in most of their time on the board, they've never done it. So that's why they were just sort of cleaning that up.
Do we have all of our spots full on the Board of Trustees?
Currently, we do.
Okay.
One of the things, I'll say it, now this is my moment, one of the things that they had asked about was an alternate, okay, being added in there, and being able to vote in the absence of one of the regular board members. And the reason why that came up is because I had 3 board members last year, and Bruce Allen asked if he could come back and just do the minutes. I mean, what a blessing. And so we said yes. And so at that time, we had 4 folks coming to the meetings, and, he wasn't one of the paid members, but anyway, there's a spot where you could add in an alternate in one of the paragraphs, where it defines the makeup of the board and their terms of 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year. I probably should have put it in there before I brought it up, but
You want to add it in?
So you did include it?
no, I did not.
You did not.
But I figured I'd take the opportunity to mention it. One of the trustees brought it up, so.
I'm fine including that in my motion to have as part of the draft.
Add
We-
language
we
to have
would-
an alternate board member?
I'd be willing to craft the language. I don't know if this is going to this Monday's meeting. right?
No.
No, it won't be, but.
Yeah, so I could craft the language with the city administrator and add that, and I think they'd appreciate it. It's not like we're gonna have an alternate, but when we did have one, they thought it would be nice if that person could vote in place of the regular member who was on long-term illness.
Great. Okay, is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor of sending that to council? Any opposed? That's unanimous, and it looks like we're at the end of our agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, and all those in favor? Great. We're adjourned.